Hello and good morning, or is it afternoon now? I'm delighted to have been invited here to Borås. It's not my first visit here, but this relationship goes back some way. And thank you, Simonetta and Jonas. And I'm going to talk through quite a number of things about design-led research and then design for longevity. But just to say also that before I entered academia, which was a while ago, I had my own fashion knitwear label and brand for about 15 years, and I was completely self-taught, didn't have any training in going into business. I studied mathematics before I started, revived an interest I had in knitting. So very much sort of by the boot, pulling myself up by the bootstraps. So a lot of the lessons learned, I've sort of feed into some of the research, because I have done quite a bit of research and then still doing research with micro and small fashion businesses. So I really do feel that that's a very important sector. So that's the perspective that I'm taking. And what I do realise is that although lots of things have changed in the world, a lot hasn't changed in terms of survival for in business. So that's just a sort of backdrop to what I'm going to talk about. So just a few pictures to start with, no surprises, but fashion, aspirational, glamour, very important use of textiles, leading fashion very often. This happened. My office is in London College of Fashion in Oxford Circus. So this is when we know what the impact of some of these sort of what we now call fast fashion. And of course, we understand that this is awfully what happened. So we're here to try to close the loop on some of these awful issues. We've also got other issues, not just as a lot of things that we use, our phones, our gadgets, and there is no away, as we all realise now. You can't just throw something away. And then, I'm not going into all of this detail, but we do know some of the sort of real issues. The Rana Plaza disaster in 2013, it's coming up for the anniversary now, the 6th anniversary. And that was something which really was something of a watershed. So it spawned the fashion revolution movement, which I think has been a fantastic campaign and continues to do that. This is quite a good factory, but it's still incredibly intense working environment. Anyway, but I actually like to remind ourselves how powerful and important fashion is in cultural sense, picking up on Simonetta's words. So it does a lot for us. So whatever we're talking about here, we're in the fashion industry, a textile industry, but we're not trying to abolish fashion. It's not because I believe that fashion provides an awful lot of delight to people. But there's all these endemic issues that we really have to do something about. But I think it's important to realise that what we actually gain from enjoying how we dress and so on, and how we communicate. And culturally, it's very important. But we know, as I said, how wasteful it is. I don't need to rehearse all these arguments. We've heard a lot already this morning. And the perspective I'm taking is how important it is for economically and culturally. And I developed this concept called the fashion paradox, because it is, how do we reconcile all of these different things? We all want livelihoods, we all want to feel good, but yet we have a huge amount of overconsumption. And how do we make, there was mention of a sweet spot earlier on, but actually it's more than a spot. How do we actually reconcile all of these different conditions, but yet still flourish and can still be prosperous as a global economy and global industry? So I like to take the view of design as being an enabler and a catalyst, and designers and that function. A long time ago, I ran a project, one of my earliest research projects was called Interrogating Fashion. And within that, looking for new paradigms for the 21st century, ran that in 2005. And these were the three themes: digital fashion, about how do we get from the craft, it's one of the last major craft-based industries, but how do we sort of reliant on people with manual skills producing stuff in terms of garment production. So then there's the concept of mass customization, which I'll say a little bit more about later. Fashion in context, how in fact people really relate to fashion and how it's culturally important. The Victoria and Albert Museum in London, whenever it puts on a fashion exhibition, they actually, and other museums and so galleries, they actually attract the biggest audiences ever, and they just keep growing. You've got Balenciaga here. The fashion paradox then was what I've just discussed about transience and sustainability. So I do believe that the role of the designer in fashion businesses, whether large or small, obviously they have more influence and power the smaller they are in their micro businesses, but even in a large company, it's a very central role that actually has to speak and communicate upstream and downstream, both to the sort of senior management, the buyers, the marketers, and also communicate with the producers, the samplers, and the manufacturers. So the potential there is for either just keeping on doing things with a little bit of change here and there, or they can radically innovate, but knowledge is needed. So I started to publish on sustainable fashion. My first book was in 2008. That was it's over 10 years ago now, and that is quite a seminal year for publications and for the beginning. This was all awareness raising. That's where we were then, and I do believe now we've got to accelerate and action things. But some of that work was looking at pioneers. I also discussed from fibre to right through to garment, because people often thought that the garments are born in the shop. So this was about sort of deconstructing that and looking at different strategies for sustainable fashion design. Some of which, the starting point with everybody is always materials, and it's maybe using what we like to think of as sustainable materials, and I take your point, Sandra. Other than that, it's also redesigning, or what we now call upcycling, so that you're you're reusing and redesigning with old. And I'll show you quite a few examples of that as well. Also eliminating any waste along the process and using reclaimed materials. Pioneer, obviously Catherine Hamnett did a huge amount of awareness raising since the 80s and is still going strong. Linda Gross, who she's collaborated with as well, did her first eco collection with Esprit in California in 1992. So some of these pioneers have been working for quite some time. Upcycling, this is a no longer in business, London-based, only two people, micro business, who upcycled ex-military and ex-tailored suits. This person, Christopher Rayburn, is still in business, and he's been going for over 10 years now, which is quite an achievement for a small business, and upcycles as part, and also remakes and makes in his studio as part of his actual ethos, and these are recycled parachutes. From Somewhere was a brand that no longer exists, but this is the co-founder of Fashion Revolution now. So interesting times. So other ways to design for sustainability. Aftercare is a massive importance. You can do things like use darker colours, and people don't need to wash them as often. Designing for longer life and reuse. Now, this is not easy, but this is what we're looking at now. Monomaterials, if you use a single material, then there is potential for that to be easily recycled within the systems that we have. We need more systems. Modular design for things to be easily taken apart. But also things like adaptability, future proofing, so that perhaps something will be flexible and change, and it's designed also for recyclability at the end of whichever life we want to maintain the lives as many as possible. Also smart fashion, but that's going to create new waste streams unless we're very careful immediately. Also new business models for circularity. Take-backs, repair, sharing schemes, I'll say more about those later on. My second book on sustainable fashion is an edited book with lots of contributions from many people. Simonetta was one of those, and her colleagues. Now, also, this was looking very much at we have the pioneers, the micro businesses, we then have the big businesses, but this was looking at some of the designer-led businesses. So these are the themes, one of which was everyday clothing and enduring design. So why do people keep things for longer? It's not always easy to predict. It's not always actually possible to design in longevity because people do different things with their clothes. So, but it was also about speed, technology, what can that do with it for things? And these are some of the questions. And can fashion ever be sustainable? I think the answer to that we know has to be yes, because it can't be no. The planet won't actually make it happen, allow it to happen. And this is some of the, one of the designers that, I interviewed a lot of designers and commissioned some things. So Eileen Fisher, whose business has always been about female empowerment, but it's also about engaging consumers. And she's done a lot more things. I'll come back to her later on. She's done a lot more things in terms of take back and first, second and third life. I also interviewed Dries van Noten, for instance, and Hussein Chalayan. And you know, this is about people designing clothes. I mean, he's saying everyone's got enough clothes already, but I want people to wear them for a long time. And so these are some of the sort of approaches. So high quality, luxury has always been associated with longevity. These are some other strategies, zero waste, and also the person from somewhere also was upcycling these. This is a dress made from Speedo waste swimsuits, the ones I couldn't use in the Olympics. And then she also worked with bigger companies like Tesco's to try and introduce upcycling into that dress on the right, which was quite an iconic dress. But now she's not producing stuff, she's campaigning. So I'm part of the Centre for Sustainable Fashion at London College of Fashion, and we work on 3 different levels: research projects, knowledge exchange, which means working directly with industry, big industry, small industry. We're currently just working with Kering Group, and we also pioneer education, and that's something that we've just been very successful in terms of launching a new online education course, which anybody here can actually go on and do. These are the issues of, there's the Aral Sea, you know, these are the issues that we're all in the room here thinking about and how to deal with all of it. The Centre for Sustainable Fashion publications, and one of my colleagues, mine are on the top, so I write about knitting and sustainability and fashion in general. And then my colleague Kate Fletcher's work you may know on sustainable fashion as well, a real pioneer. So we're consuming so much more, and the cost has declined. So unlike many other things, the cost has actually declined. So what do we do about it? So some of it is about education, as I've said, and awareness, and how to deal with this sort of thing in such a rapidly changing world. So this is the course that is now online through Future Learn, and supported by the Kering Group, who we've been working with. And that, of course, includes Stella McCartney, Gucci, Puma, lots of others. So this course is about understanding luxury fashion in a changing world. And it's actually currently running. It runs about 3 times a year. And it's free, and it lasts 6 weeks, and you can also do it. You can also, there's another level where you can pay for it. So if you're interested in that, have a look. And that's what's covered in this course. And this is a world's first. I don't think there is anything like this so far. So this we feel is pretty good. I believe that the traditional role of designers has evolved and is evolved, and the power of design as catalysing change and the centrality of the way that design thinking can work and communicate means that there are all sorts of expanding ways that designers can help and support all sorts of research and projects and collaborations with scientists and so on. And, you know, doing a lot of different things, not just designing, but doing a lot of communication. And also, again, being radical is something that I think is important. One of the projects I worked on a few years ago. It was called Considerate Design for Personalised Fashion Products, and trying very much to work with personalisation as an idea for people to engage with their pieces longer. If they've had a little part in the development or the co-design or the choosing modular, personalising something from a set of available modules, that basically they will have more engagement with that piece and it won't feel like it's so disposable. So that was the sort of premise behind this. And I think it's an increasingly important strategy for all levels of business. I think that given this sort of Industry 4, given all the potential, I mean, this was, we started this in, we did this in 2009. So given the rapid potential for digitization and different systems, I think there's more and more potential in customized and personalized products, going back in a way to what used to be bespoke, made to order, local dressmaker, so on. So these are the triangulation that we're doing. So can this provide longevity through personalization and also understanding what the costs of that is? We did workshops, we looked at all these, are all of it. This, by the way, is in the Sustainable Fashion Handbook if you happen to need to look at this more closely. We looked at what the designer has influence over, what's impacting on that designer, and there's a lot of things that are two-way, there's a lot of things that design has to deal with in actual fact, but so that's what the complexity is about. Also at London College of Fashion, we were pioneers in doing the first body scanning sizing survey, so we had a lot of information and facility for body scanning. So I wanted to introduce that technology in different ways. 3 levels of the industry. One was about industrial knitting, my area. One was 3D printing, which was still quite emerging, and one was craft-based bespoke bag production. So this is the working with the Dutch company Freedom of Creation. We developed, this is based on a customized scan, an individual scan of somebody's hand. And then, of course, body size, even if it's the same technical size, shape varies such a lot. And the idea was to create seamless one-piece knitting, one-step process. That's how it comes off the knitting machine, a tiny bit of finishing to be done. And people can personalize it, so they could, it's a fairly modular system, but it can certainly be personalized. This was the handcrafted bags, which were, this is the maker, and these are some of the more personalized things that we did, and this is a unique customized backpack, which was based on a body scan and molded hand by hand. So we also tried to help designers think about sustainability by creating a visual spider diagram tool, which is no numbers really involved except personal estimates. There were lots of different levels of this. This is the top line level, but you could drill down further. And then just to get people to actually look at things that they're already doing and think about trade-offs and what was most important to them. Another project, Fashion Innovation Research and Enterprise, Fire Up. This was directly engaging with London-based designers and looking at how to really work with, help them to sort of innovate and think a bit longer than just the next collection, which is very difficult. But they're agile, they're responsive, and they have the, I believe that this sector is like the R&D for the main fashion industry generally. I can't go into this diagram, but we looked at all the challenges, we looked at the things that are at top of their minds, and then we sponsored 4 projects and started to make some, help people experiment and access new technologies, such as this handcraft designer who then was working with a 3D virtual designer. This is about polyester. Kate Goldsworthy's research. She's part of the Mistra project, and she has done a lot of work on polyester and ways to revalue and upcycle what's already exists, because there's an awful lot if we reused what already exists. So again, I can't go into any detail. Christopher Rabin trying to also prolong his, create non-seasonal work, go back to some of his upcycled things and his archive, and people could just order online and have it made in his studio. So it's not just a seasonal collection. Here we go a little bit more into the personalised sharing. This is a company from Amsterdam, do very innovative knitwear. I don't know if anyone's heard of them. You won't be able to read all that, but they can knit. They do some amazing inventive knitting. And one of the concepts they were part of a project called Wear Sustain that I worked with them. And this is about if you could perhaps just only keep something for, say, 10 days, and the garment had a passport, and then you had to pass it on. And this is about a story developing and the garment having more agency. So if you don't do something, they'll stop you being able to use it. So it's an interesting concept about sharing. So looking at that paradigm shift from ownership to experience and rental and leasing and sharing, a couple of, obviously I think you're all aware of Philippa Kay, the circle and also the leasing work. Then also Lena Fashion Library, another one from Amsterdam, creating fashion libraries where we go and we subscribe and we get something and then we take it back. Yes, there's a transportation issue in that, but it's a very new way of thinking about clothing. And I think leasing, rental, sharing is part of the new sharing economy. It's going to get into clothing. So this is what Lena subscription service looks like. There are problems because there might only be one of something. It's not like you don't have an infinite choice. So there are differences between normal shopping. And of course, as I say, with Philippa Kay's Circle leasing, they were again being a very important part of the Mistra project as well. Eileen Fisher, I mentioned earlier on, a commitment to reuse and reselling. They have this Renew program. But first of all, the concept is that the clothes are classic, timeless, high quality in the first place, so that they're able to have more than one life, first, second, third life. So what they do is they design these pieces, then the second life people can bring them back to the shops, and then they're resold in the Renew stores, and then if they're not good enough to be reused as Eileen Fisher garments, then they have this amazing system where they felt them all together and they take them back and they make artworks out of them, which is, I think, really innovative. So this is one of the shops, recycled, made in the US. Other strategies, and this is the sort of final things that I'm coming on to, other strategies are, for instance, this is a micro business in London, reversible garments, so that one side is printed and another side is plain, and so it gives you more possibilities and adaptability for the same garments. And we all like something a bit new. Then this is one of our previous master's students, MA Fashion Futures. She has her own line, which she had for some years, and she looked back at who keeps their clothes for longest, and she redesigned some of them so that these were then multiple use clothing. So they're designed also for rental, potential rental, so that they give you as many as possible different variations. So this is reversible, and this is the shirt dress you saw, which has been separated out so that there are lots of pieces that you can put together in 120 different ways to refresh this garment. And also it's broad, you can wear it, it's adaptable for body size changes, or you can belt it. This is also, the sleeves, instead of being attached, are a separate thing. You can wear them underneath or outside, and so on and so on and so on. So ownership to experience, designing for users, designing for multiple users, designing for longevity, lots. And the business model is different, so there's more profit is made by the number of hires or the number of, rather than the number of sales. So it perhaps means a slower throughput, which is what we want. Similar, following the lines of the sort of car sharing, Airbnb, music industry, streaming. My last example is just of personalisation, is a wonderful British company called Unmade, who have really cracked the mass customization. So they have a platform of technology. You can go in on or use a tablet, and you can customize a design so it's unique to you, so nobody else will have the same thing, and you then can have that knitted. It sends the instructions straight to the knitting factory. Brilliant, I think. And this is now a platform of technology that they're working with other companies, so they're not selling direct themselves anymore. So Farfetch is one of them. And that's it. This is just the current project that I'm working on. I haven't got time to talk about that, but it's only just beginning, and it's with micro fashion businesses looking at their potential to catalyse change. Thank you.